When I was 19, Alex convinced me to try the forbidden fruit. Fast forward 6 years, and he pulled the same move again. He had a fresh, delicate intern perched on his lap. Everyone assumed that even if I saw him with another girl, I wouldn't have the guts to call it quits, but this time, I just couldn't take it anymore. One rainy night, I hauled my suitcase and left. After a while, Alex casually rang me up. "The rain's too bad, you can leave tomorrow instead." I didn't say anything. Suddenly, he yanked the phone from my ear. Instinctively, I turned around, only to find him pressing me against the huge window. When the call ended, Jamie whispered in my ear, "Setla, it's pouring out there. Why not crash at my place tonight?" As I opened the door, Alex had a young woman sitting on his lap. She was wearing a beige silk blouse and a black pencil skirt. The typical secretary look. She seemed mature and smart, but her outfit made her look innocent. Upon seeing me, she instantly blushed bright red and tried to get off Alex's lap. But he just lifted his gaze, eyes locking with mine, and tightened his hold around her. "Don't worry, I got this," he murmured with that charming, mischievous smile. In a daze, memories flashed back to when I was 19. He had coaxed me just like this. He had led me into kisses, hugs, and even hotel rooms, always telling me not to fear and to trust him completely. Now, he was using the same sweet talk on a younger girl. I couldn't help but laugh. Reeking of alcohol, Alex had a blurry, tipsy look in his eyes. "Why are you laughing, Setla?" I managed to suppress my grin and said softly, "Alex, let's break up." I didn't wait for him to respond. Ignoring the sudden hush in the room, I gently removed the plain ring I'd worn for 5 years and placed it on the coffee table before walking out. Alex didn't say a word or try to stop me. After 5 years together, he had become a hotshot entrepreneur, while I was just a minor TV host with little recognition. So, even if I caught him with another woman, no one would believe I'd actually end things. As I shut the door, voices followed me. "Setla, you're just too embarrassed to back down. You should go home and sweet talk her tonight." "No need," Alex chuckled softly. "You guys should ask her if she's brave enough to break up. All these years, I gave her a place to stand, a home." Calm and collected, Alex looked down, confident she wouldn't dare. I gripped the doorknob, stood tall, but tears suddenly streamed down my face. He had promised me a home when I was young, and that's why I had fallen for him, feeling alone and helpless. But now, those old promises felt like daggers in my heart. The people closest to you often hurt you the most. It took me 3 days to pack up at home. During that time, mutual friends subtly probed, but I didn't respond. I just calmly packed everything I owned. On the last night, I meticulously checked the house, making sure not a single thing was left behind before calling a cab. As the moving truck took my stuff, the rain poured down harder. Thunderstorms were my worst fear. When I was a kid, my parents died on a night like this. Back then, Alex would stay by my side during every stormy night. I had depended on him so much. But now, I didn't need him anymore. The taxi sped into the heavy rain, and I stared at the raindrops streaming down the window, lost in thought. Suddenly, the car skidded and screeched to a halt. The car behind us couldn't avoid the crash and collided with us. Thankfully, it wasn't too bad. I turned around, still shaken, and saw a Rolls-Royce parked like a ship in the storm, its shiny plates glistening in the rain. Before the driver could curse, he quickly bit his tongue. A man in a slick black suit stepped out, holding an umbrella. His expensive leather shoes splashed through the puddles as he approached my car, shielded by his umbrella. But his cold, handsome face was unmistakable. "Mr. Jamie?" I blinked in disbelief. Jamie looked at me with a hidden smile, amusement flickering in his eyes. What a coincidence! The car rolled into Jamie's private garage before the driver even exited. Jamie reached out, grabbed my chin, and kissed me directly. Startled, I tried to push him away, but he held my wrist firmly. His voice was icy. "Did you ever think about this moment when you set me up before?" My wrist hurt from his grip, but I couldn't defend myself. I could only mutter, "Sorry, Jamie," whether I knew about it or not, whether it was on purpose or not. Jamie had been framed, his reputation tarnished. That was the truth. Don't try to brush it off with that line. Last time I didn't touch you and I was labeled as forcing a woman. How about we make that accusation true today? Jamie wiped the moisture from the corner of my mouth. Pale and shocked, I looked at him. Sir, don't try to make me soft. He slowly slid the strap of my dress down. You should know. I'm as tough inside as I am outside. I closed my eyes in despair, remembering the scandal that had lasted half a month. Though it was suppressed and no one dared to mention it again, it had cost Jamie an important project that ended up in Alex's hands. Even if it was a coincidence, Jamie wouldn't believe otherwise. A man like him couldn't accept such humiliation. Can't we do this somewhere else? I weakly tugged at his sleeve, trembling as I begged. Please, Jamie. But Jamie didn't seem much better. His face was tense, and his Adam's apple bobbed as his voice grew hoarse. Looks like your man isn't cutting it, Setla. Can you stop talking about him? I lowered my eyes. Alex and I have broken up. We're done. Jamie suddenly stared intently at me. Then, in the next moment, the unyielding man pulled back, retreating from me. I exhaled a breath of relief, instinctively loosening my grip on his arm. But immediately, Jamie tightened his hold around my waist. His rigid, powerful body pressed against my soft skin. My fingertips dug into his flesh as my voice shattered under the pressure. Outside, the rain kept pounding, drowning out the sounds inside. By dawn, the rain still hadn't ceased. Jamie carried my drenched body to the large window. Suddenly, my phone rang again, endlessly. It was Alex calling. I trembled as I answered. Did you move out? His voice was emotionless. My fingers pressed against the cold glass, my voice hoarse. Yes. When? Tonight. The rain's too bad. You can leave tomorrow instead. His voice was so indifferent. How pathetic. I hadn't even spoken when the phone was snatched away. Instinctively, I turned, but Jamie had already wrapped his arms around me, pinning me against the window. He glanced at my phone's lit screen, then pressed it to my ear, cutting the call. The rain's crazy, he said softly. Why don't you stay at my place tonight? I shook my head, my wet hair sticking to my back. The stark black and white contrast was jarring. Jamie leaned in, kissing my neck. One more time. I didn't refuse, only softly asked, Aren't we even now? The emotion in Jamie's eyes suddenly turned cold. He smiled, his fingers curling through my long hair. You want to call it even? Fine. We can. My soaked hair tangled around his fingers tightly. He gently pulled me closer. His other hand grasped my chin, lifting my face. The night was dark, but his eyes were even deeper. Then let me cement that accusation, Setla. That's how we'll call it even. A shiver ran through me. Jamie wasn't using much force, and the 2 times before, I could feel he was holding back. If he hadn't, I might have been torn apart already. After all, there was a huge physical difference between us. If he really meant to hurt me, to prove that accusation true, I'd be the one suffering. Maybe it was because tonight we did the most intimate thing between a man and a woman. Once that line is crossed, things subtly change without realizing it. Strangely, I wasn't too scared. I just looked up at him, even managing a smile. Jamie, go ahead and prove the accusation, but there's one thing. I stood on my tiptoes, leaning in to kiss the corner of his lips. I don't want to get hurt. My job's on camera, after all. It was probably the first time I actively tried to please him. As he lowered his eyes to meet my kiss, his voice deepened. Setla, you have a second choice. What choice? Take the initiative, make me feel good, and maybe I'll let you off the hook. I widened my eyes instantly. Jamie was different from Alex. His reputation was never great. His rise to power wasn't exactly clean. But in recent years, as his business empire grew, he had shed his rough edges. I still remembered last year when he was interviewed by a financial magazine. He was composed, calm, and poised. Some journalists even called him the most gentlemanly businessman. Because of that, many had almost forgotten that Jamie wasn't from a noble family, nurtured for decades. He had once been scraping by on the streets over 10 years ago. Deep down, he didn't have much of a gentleman's bone in him. What's up? Jamie's lips curled into a grin. Are you scared? I shook my head but bit my lip. No, it's just, I don't know how to. Jamie's smile faded. After all these years, didn't he teach you? I hadn't even opened my mouth when Jamie spoke again. Wasn't that night you were quite skilled? My face turned bright red. At the time, I thought I was just drunk, which is why I acted out. But later, I realized my drink must have been spiked. Otherwise, even if I were drunk, I wouldn't have clung to a man and tried to undress him like that. I think my drink was spiked. That's why I. Jamie looked down, no trace of a smile. Didn't you ask Alex what he slipped in your drink? Mr. Jamie, that was just an accident. But as soon as I said it, doubt crept in. When Alex took that project from me, I wondered if he set me up. But at the time, Alex and I weren't estranged. People tend to defend those they care about deeply. Now, though, Alex and I had completely broken up. Some thoughts started to shift, but then Jamie suddenly let go of me. His gaze was distant, filled with indifference. I'm going to take a shower. With that, he walked into the bathroom. When he came out, I was still by the window. The rain had been falling all night. The city was engulfed in mist and fog. Everything outside was blurry. I stood there, lost in thought. Jamie approached from behind, wrapping his arms around me. His body was still damp from the cold water vapor, and I couldn't help but shiver. What are you thinking about? Thinking about what we just talked about. Jamie scoffed. You might as well think about how you're going to make me let you off the hook. I don't feel like it, but before I could finish, he leaned in and kissed me forcefully. Thinking about other men in front of me? Do you think I've been too kind to you the last 2 times? His kiss grew more intense, but the frost in his eyes didn't melt. Suddenly, I felt scared. At that moment, Jamie felt like a completely different person. In his eyes, I could tell he wouldn't show any mercy this time. Desperation made me set aside all my pride. They say Jamie was ruthless and reckless when he was younger, which is why a mob boss noticed him. That's how he shot to the top. Someone like him didn't value human life much. As I responded to his kiss, I wrapped my arms around his neck. You said I should take the initiative. I won't, but I'll learn. Will you teach me? I'll teach you properly. When the kiss finally ended, Jamie chuckled softly. All right. As I straddled his muscular waist, my face was so flushed I could barely look at it. But Jamie raised his hand and swept my long hair behind my back. I bit my lip, trying to cover myself with my arms, but he grabbed my wrist tightly. Jamie? I stared at him, tears welling up, but he wasn't moved. Setla. His voice was cold and detached. You've already done it. No need to act all shy now. It's pouring outside. You can scream louder if you want. I shook my head, tears brimming. I can't. Jamie, please, don't make me force you. I really can't. I lowered my head, tears falling onto his chest. I feared he'd get angry and try to pull my hand away to wipe them off, but he just tightened his grip. Jamie didn't say anything. He simply watched me, crying silently. I wasn't exceptionally beautiful, slim, not particularly likable. I cried easily, always getting teary-eyed. Every time he said something sharp, I looked like I'd been horribly shocked, as if he could kill me at any moment. And I had just broken up with a 6-year boyfriend. Jamie furrowed his brows. He hadn't planned to get involved with a woman like me. But absurdly, after that night, he found himself thinking about it more and more often. He thought about how I had climbed on top of him, undressing him, how he had held my wrist, stopping me from misbehaving, how my eyes had filled with tears, feeling wronged. If it was lust, many women had tried to throw themselves at him over the years. He'd seen his share of women who stripped and glued themselves to him, but he had never reacted like this before. In fact, he often regretted it later. That night, why didn't he just let things unfold naturally and firmly blame himself? As a result, he felt like he had become a complete freak. He had people monitoring Setla and Alex 24/7. The moment I moved out of Alex's house, he had trailed me like a stalker, following my car. When he took me away, he blamed it all on his thirst for revenge. But even though he wanted to get back at me, he couldn't help but care about my feelings and experiences. Even during those 2 previous times, he had been holding back, trying to restrain himself. He never fully let go, and I acted like I had been terribly wronged. Just moments ago, I was trying to blame someone like Alex, that scumbag. At that moment, he really wanted to throw me out into the pouring rain, to make me snap out of it. But in the end, he went to the bathroom and took a cold shower. Jamie had little respect for himself then. Since he was a kid, he always believed that a man should never be controlled by a woman. This time, he definitely wouldn't soften. Yet, when I lowered my head and cried, his heart softened again because of my tears. Jamie raised his hand, his rough fingertips gently brushing against my full lips. I was small and delicate, but my cherry-colored lips were full, with a slight sensuality to them. The feeling of kissing me was incredible. It seemed like he liked kissing me more than being intimate. He even preferred making me cry, making me feel dirty. "Why are you crying?" Jamie pinched my chin, forcing me to look up, but the tears kept falling. "I only said a few things, and you still haven't done anything." Jamie wiped away the tears at the corner of my eye. "If someone didn't know better, they'd think I actually forced you." "I'm sorry." I stared at him, tears relentless. "Enough." Jamie suddenly sat up straight and gently lifted me off him. He grabbed a thin blanket and wrapped it around me. "If you stop crying now, we'll just sleep." I stared at him, wide-eyed, still with tears streaming down. Frozen in place, Jamie raised the corner of his lips. "What's wrong? Don't want to sleep?" I shook my head vigorously, then quickly closed my eyes. Jamie lifted the blanket and lay down beside me. I instinctively curled up, trying to keep my distance. But Jamie pulled me into his arms. "Setla? Sleep well and don't move around. If you stir things up, you'll be the one to deal with it." "Got it." I lay still, too afraid to move. It wasn't until Jamie's breathing steadied that I hesitantly tried to ease the stiffness in my body. But just as I was about to slip out of his arms, Jamie flipped over and pinned me beneath him. "Setla, I told you not to tempt me." "I didn't." "I say you did." In the darkness, Jamie leaned down and kissed me deeply. It seemed like he especially loved kissing. This kiss was deeper, lingering. By the time it ended, I realized how deeply I had already become connected with Jamie. This time, the sensation was different from before. I clutched his arm in fear. "Jamie?" It felt too intense, and I trembled uncontrollably. Jamie's strong arms were braced on either side of me, his breath brushing my ear. "Have you been here?" My mind was blown. Tears poured from my eyes, but I couldn't tell if they were from pleasure or fear of something new. Yet his fingers felt soft and powerless. I felt like an island being washed away by a torrential downpour, about to be torn apart by the overwhelming force. The rain's roar was deafening. In the dim room, Jamie suddenly grabbed my hand and pressed it against his abdomen. His top muscles were covered in water droplets. "Setla." His voice was hoarse and low, but there was a hint of satisfaction. "Look, you're more powerful than the rain outside." I felt dizzy, like a small boat on a stormy sea, drifting aimlessly. I couldn't understand his words, only that my little boat was about to be shattered by the waves. "This heavy rain didn't even soak me, but you've drenched me all over. Setla, what do you think should be your compensation?" When I woke up again, the rain had stopped. Jamie wasn't in the room. I went to the bathroom and soaked in the tub for a long time, but my mind was still a mess. After leaving the bathroom, I turned on my phone and plugged it in. Countless messages and missed calls flooded in. A few were from Alex. I didn't call him back, just deleted his contact. I'd taken some time off, so I didn't have to go to the station for work. The moving company had already delivered my things to my new apartment. It was less than 20 square meters, renting for nearly $20,000 a month. For me, that was a huge expense. Thankfully, Alex had been generous over the years, and I had saved some money, so I didn't have to worry about daily expenses. The only problem now was Jamie. But when I went downstairs, he wasn't there. I had a meal in the dining room, and when I cautiously mentioned wanting to leave, the staff didn't stop me. Instead, they sent a driver to courteously take me back to my apartment. I thought about it the whole way and concluded that the tension between Jamie and me had likely been resolved. This realization made me breathe a sigh of relief. It was a good thing. After all, a man like Jamie was really hard to please. But after just one night, I felt completely drained, like I'd been emptied out. If we kept doing this every night, I felt my life might be in danger. The new apartment was small, and I didn't have many things. It only took half a day to settle everything. The one-bedroom place was enough for me to live alone. Although it didn't compare to Alex's spacious mansion, lying in my own little bed now felt reassuring. The afternoon sunlight was warm, and I didn't know when I fell asleep. In my dream, I went back to when I was 19. Alex was coaxing me, and we sneaked into a hotel room to taste the forbidden fruit. Afterward, I cried nonstop, not just from the pain, but because I was scared. He held me tightly, slipping a simple ring onto my finger. After you graduate, we'll get married. Tears fell in my dream, but deep down, those tears weren't for Alex. They were for the naive, foolish Setla at 19, for that lonely Setla who longed for a home. After deleting Alex's contact, he never reached out again. I distanced myself from his circle, rarely hearing anything about him anymore. When the holiday ended, I returned to work at the station. Then I heard some surprising news. Tiffany, another female host who never got along with me, had managed to get Alex on her show. The whole station was in an uproar. Almost everyone knew Alex never appeared on any programs or accepted interviews. I sat at my desk, stunned. My show had been struggling with low ratings and poor performance, almost getting canceled. At that time, Alex had just started making a name for himself. Because of his handsome looks and charm, he was extremely popular. The station leaders had tried multiple times to get him on a show or agree to an interview, but he refused each time. I had considered it too, even asking him for just one interview that wouldn't require him to show his face. We wouldn't reveal our relationship, but Alex turned me down as well. Now, though, he was about to appear on Tiffany's show without any harsh conditions. The questions the station prepared were broad, even covering the audience's favorite topic, romantic relationships. But Alex knew very well that Tiffany and I had a poor relationship. Since we started our internships after graduation, she had always wanted to step on me and push me down. Alex must be doing this on purpose. I couldn't understand why. He had moved on, found someone new. I had broken up with him and moved out to make room for the new person. Shouldn't he be grateful to me? I couldn't figure it out, so I decided not to dwell on it anymore. Anyway, this was Tiffany's skill and luck. At this point, I had no other choice. I had to focus on doing my job well. But in the afternoon, I received another rejection from the agent of the newly crowned Best Actress. I wasn't surprised. After all, this show had never really gained much attention. Most of the guests they managed to invite were relatively unknown. Setla, you need to think of something quickly. This episode with Tiffany is definitely going to be a hit. Once it blows up, they'll cancel our segment without a doubt. I know. I'll think of something. If we could get Jamie on the show, that'd be great. Of course, I'm probably just dreaming. My partner sighed, shaking her head. She's really lucky. Actually, the station was originally planning to cancel her segment, but who would have known she'd managed to get Alex? Do you think something's going on between them? I thought for a moment. I heard Alex has a girlfriend. Tiffany probably has nothing to do with him. But I was quickly slapped in the face. In the afternoon, Tiffany received 999 red roses. At 6 o'clock, when work ended, Alex's Bentley was parked right in front of the station's main entrance. Tiffany changed into a beautiful strapless dress, happily skipping into Alex's car. By 9 p.m., I was scrolling through Tiffany's Instagram. The restaurant Alex took her to was my favorite revolving restaurant. The photo showed 3 dishes, each something I loved. The gentleman holding his knife and fork had long fingers, and on his middle finger was a simple ring. I'd seen it for 6 years, so familiar I couldn't mistake it. It was Alex's ring. I smiled, put my phone down, and went to take a shower. When I came out of the bathroom, an old friend suddenly called me. I answered, and to my surprise, it was Alex's voice. Setla. His tone was a bit cold, with an obvious drunken slur. You should move back, and I'll go on your show. I couldn't help but laugh. The day I left, there's no going back, Setla. You should know. If I go on Tiffany's show, your segment will be canceled, and you'll lose your job. So what? Alex's voice suddenly softened. I fired that intern. Also, nothing happened between me and her. You don't have any family, and your relatives are distant. You should know. Only I can be your support. Alex, I used to think that way, but now I don't need it anymore. Setla, don't be so stubborn. Don't call me again. I hung up the phone and blocked the number. Those friends were just Alex's friends. Since we broke up, there was no reason to keep in touch with them. My phone rang again. It was an unfamiliar number. Naturally, I assumed it was Alex, so I hung up immediately and blocked it. A moment later, another unfamiliar number sent me a text. Try hanging up on me again. I was a bit stunned and replied, "Who is this?" The phone rang again. I hesitated for a second before picking up. It was Jamie's voice. "You're getting bolder. Sorry, I didn't know it was your number." "Who did you think it was, Alex?" Yes, then the call abruptly ended. I was confused, but I didn't call back. Just as I was about to fall asleep, the number called again. "Open the door." My bedroom was small, and the bed was even smaller. The bathroom was tiny, too. Jamie came in after a shower, glanced at the bed, and frowned. "I'll sleep on the couch," I said, getting up to leave. A 1.20 m bed was cramped even for one person, but Jamie directly shut the bedroom door. "I'm here to sleep with you, not on the bed." My face heated up. "Keep your voice down. Don't say that. The walls here aren't soundproof." Jamie threw his towel aside. He looked down at me with a raised brow. "You should be the one keeping quiet." When he pushed me onto the bed, Jamie added, "Don't make noise while crying. Don't want the neighbors to hear and think I'm committing a crime." I couldn't hold it in anymore and glared at him. "Can you stop bringing that up?" Jamie shrugged, unzipping my nightgown. He grinned. "Isn't this all your fault?" I couldn't argue, so I kept silent. The bed was too small, no room to move. The apartment wasn't soundproof, so I bit my lip and refused to make a sound. Jamie wasn't satisfied. "You'll move out tomorrow. Don't stay here anymore." "Move where? I can't afford a better place. You know how high the rent is here." "I'll buy you a place." Jamie leaned down to kiss me. "Move tomorrow." I was about to refuse when he added, "If you move in, I'll go on your show." "Really?" "Of course it's true, but there's one condition. I'll provide the interview questions." The news that Jamie would be on my show spread like wildfire the next day at the station. What excited everyone even more was the bombshell news brought by Jamie's secretary. "Mr. Jamie will announce something on the show. I can only reveal one thing. It's related to his love life." The station's leaders were ecstatic. My partner was also extremely excited. Someone like Jamie, who'd never appeared on a live broadcast before, was bound to draw massive interest. This was 100 times more exciting than Alex being on the show. After all, more than 10 years ago, Jamie was still a street vendor. Now he was a big shot, stirring up storms. Who wouldn't be curious about a man like that? Once the excitement faded, I brewed a cup of coffee. Sitting at my desk, I spaced out for a moment. Jamie was going to announce some happy news on the show. If I guessed right, it probably had something to do with his marriage. Who would his fiancée be? Countless socialites liked him now. Several prominent families had expressed interest in marrying him. Jamie didn't come from a wealthy background, though he had achieved success now. But in terms of family lineage, he couldn't compare to those top-tier families. He'd probably marry a young lady from a prestigious family. None of this had anything to do with me. But last night, he told me he'd buy me a house and have me move in. So, was he asking me to be his mistress? Although I was just an ordinary small-time host at the station, I would never agree to be someone's mistress, even if it was Jamie, and even if being with him would let me rise to the top. I didn't move into the house Jamie offered. The next day, I handed in my resignation letter to the company. Rejecting Jamie naturally meant the show would fall apart. This time, I was once again Tiffany's defeated opponent. Instead of waiting for the show to be canceled, it was better to resign on my own terms. But the boss's look was a bit strange. "Setla, you really can't quit now." "Why not?" "Because Jamie is going to be on your show. He turned down Tiffany's show and is coming on yours in the same episode." I was stunned. Was Jamie out of his mind, or had I heard wrong? Jamie has already agreed. And Alex is also going to announce some good news on the show. "Setla, once this show airs, you'll be an overnight sensation. Take your resignation letter back for now." The boss handed me the resignation letter. "Hurry up and prepare well. Filming for the pre-broadcast starts tomorrow. Make sure you're in your best shape." On my way back to the office, I ran into Tiffany. Her makeup was smeared, her eyes swollen and red, as if she had just been crying. When she saw me, her hatred was palpable. "Setla, This is all your fault. It's because of you. You ruined everything I had. Alex was supposed to be your boyfriend, yet you let him play with me like this. What were you thinking? How could a woman like you be so vicious? Tiffany seemed to lose it, grabbing a flower pot and throwing it at me. I was wearing high heels and almost tripped over the carpet while dodging. I could only helplessly cover my head with my arms. But the flower pot missed me. Jamie had arrived at some point. He blocked the flower pot with his body. It hit his forehead, and blood quickly started to flow. The studio was thrown into chaos. Tiffany was dragged away by security. Someone called for an ambulance. I sat dumbfounded on the floor, pressing my hands over Jamie's forehead. Blood poured out between my fingers, warm and sticky. My senses started to return, bit by bit. Jamie! I called his name, dazed. Tears began to fall. Maybe my tears were falling too quickly. Jamie forced a smile, curling his lips. Why are you crying again? Stop talking, you're bleeding, Jamie. So, I'm bleeding. Why are you crying? I couldn't answer. I just kept staring at the blood on his face, tears streaming down. Jamie was rushed into the ER for stitches. I sat absent-mindedly on a bench in the hallway until a nurse pushed him into a room and called me over. I saw the bandage on his forehead, wrapped tightly with gauze. The strong and sturdy man now looked a bit pale and weak. Does it hurt? I fought back my tears and asked softly, Do you want some water? Jamie nodded, then shook his head. Just sit here. I obediently sat beside him. Kiss me. What? Come here. Kiss me? But you're hurt. It's just my forehead. I'll go get you some water. I stood up to leave, but Jamie suddenly groaned softly. I was startled and hurried over to check his forehead. Instead, Jamie pulled me into his arms. He tilted his head and kissed me, then kissed deeper and deeper, without restraint, until I was out of breath. Why do you taste so good? Jamie's fingers caressed my swollen lips. Then, he lowered his voice and said something that made my face flush. I instantly turned red, pushing him away. Don't even think about it! Jamie raised an eyebrow playfully. Not even thinking about it? Not even thinking about it. I shot him a glare. You're such a rascal, a rogue. You're not wrong. 13 years ago, I was a rogue. I'm ignoring you? Jamie suddenly smiled. I'm injured. Cook me some soup tonight. Tell your housekeeper to make it. After I said that, I regretted it. No matter what. Jamie got hurt for me. I only knew how to make the simplest soup. Great, I like all kinds of soup. I'll make it for you tonight. Jamie smiled even more deeply. All right then. Make sure it's a good one. I felt his words had a different meaning, but I brushed it off. That evening, when I made him the soup, he drank 2 big bowls and then complained of dizziness, asking me to help him back to his room. I knew right away that I hadn't wronged this rogue who was always thinking about men and women. That night was also my first time taking the initiative, but I wasn't physically prepared and my stamina was lacking. In just a few minutes, I gave up and refused to move. Jamie wasn't upset, or maybe it was because of his injury. That night had a surprisingly gentle, almost tender atmosphere, but I really liked it. In the end, I fell asleep in his arms, completely at ease. I didn't even remember how I took a bath. The next morning, when I woke up, Jamie was still asleep. I stood by the bed, watching him for a while. Then I thought about a lot of things. When I first found out he was going to get engaged, I decided I wouldn't entangle myself with him anymore. But yesterday, he got hurt for me. Let's call it even for tonight. It seemed like from the start, Jamie and I were either figuring out how to settle things or balance the scales. But no matter what, at least it felt like we were closing a chapter. I didn't wake him. I took a shower and left Jamie's place. Tiffany was taken away by the police. She might face detention. I submitted my resignation letter again. As I was leaving the company, I ran into Alex. Zetla, he called me, standing under the bright summer sun. He was still handsome and charming, but no longer the man I had once loved. Are you really resigning? Yes. Didn't you really like this job? I did like this job, but now I'm exhausted. Without a powerful background and unwilling to accept the hidden rules, I was just left to sit on the sidelines. And if I had to rely on a man to get ahead, I'd forever be looked down on. Better not quit. I never agreed with you working anyway. It's hard work, and the pay is low. Alex walked up to me. Why not just be a full-time wife? When I first started earning money, I told you, I don't want my wife to go through all this hardship. Now that you've resigned, come back with me. I'll support you from now on. He naturally took my hand as if nothing had happened, as if he'd never been involved with any other women or slept with anyone else since we broke up. The sun was blinding, and I squinted, thinking, how could Alex look so unrecognizable? I pulled my hand away. Alex, we've already broken up. All right, I know I upset you last time, but it's been so long. You should have gotten over it by now. I'm not angry. I looked at him calmly. Alex, I'm serious. The smile on his face slowly faded. Setla, you're 25 now. Don't be so willful, so childish. Without a job, without me, how will you survive in this city? Seeing that I didn't answer, his tone softened. Didn't you always want to marry me, to have a home? I've already prepared a house for us. It's the one we saw before, the mountaintop villa, in the East District. You can decorate it however you like, okay? I wanted to refuse, but before I could speak, Jamie's voice suddenly came from nearby. So, you won't move into the house I gave you because his house is bigger than mine? Jamie was leaning against the car, a cigarette dangling from the corner of his mouth, looking every bit the reckless rogue. The wound on his head seemed recent, the bandage soaked with bright red blood. I frowned immediately. You can't smoke right now. Jamie raised his hand to take the cigarette out, but didn't bother putting it out. By the way, he said casually, I bought the biggest mountaintop villa in that area. The one he bought isn't as big as mine. Setla, think carefully before you make your decision. Alex's face turned ashen. Jamie, what do you mean by that? Jamie shrugged. Isn't it obvious? You're giving my woman a house? Your woman? Alex clenched his teeth. When did she become your woman? Jamie grinned. Wasn't it you who sent her to me in the first place? Alex's expression shifted instantly, but Jamie didn't waste any more time talking to him. I've made sure to store away all the drinks and food she's had. I've sent everything to the police. Mr. Alex, if you're innocent, the law will clear your name. But if you're the one behind all this, the law won't spare you, and I won't spare you either. Jamie stubbed out his cigarette just as the police arrived. Without saying another word, he walked past the dejected Alex and came toward me. Setla, I've been the good guy for almost 5 years. Now can I finally like you? I froze, my eyes widening. The hot wind swept past. Memories that were almost forgotten suddenly surged back. The girl who had just lost her parents in a shipwreck. The street-smart boy struggling to make a living. Two people who shouldn't have crossed paths. Their worlds collided because of that one event. The anxious girl gently wiped the blood off the boy's face after he got hurt in a fight, then put a cartoon Band-Aid on his forehead to cover the wound. The boy, dazed, grabbed her white skirt and wouldn't let go. Her soft and kind heart made her sit with him on the dirty ground, not leaving his side. When they parted ways, the boy asked the fragile, thin girl, "What's your name? Can I come find you later? Can I like you?" The girl stuffed the Band-Aids and her spare change into his hands. She just smiled and said, "Then you have to be a good person. Boys who fight and cause trouble can't like me. I won't like them either. If you're a good person, can you like me?" Of course. Being liked is a happy thing. I'm leaving. I won't be coming back here. She was going to live with her relatives after losing her parents. She was leaving this place, going to a new school, starting a whole new life. Years later, when she had grown up, she had long forgotten that small event. She had met a good-looking guy she liked and foolishly gave him her heart. But through all the years, there was one person who never forgot her, not for a single minute. No one knew the hardships he'd been through to get to where he was, to turn himself into a good person. But by then, the girl he had in his heart already had someone she liked. Even so, he never once thought about finding someone else or liking someone else. Until that night. Until the accident happened. In truth, the crude methods used were something someone with his experience in the roughest of storms could easily see through. But at that moment, all he cared about was one thing. He couldn't let her get hurt. He couldn't let her be sad. So he swallowed his pride and let it go. He didn't seek revenge on Alex until the person who had been following her told him she was packing her things to leave Alex's house. Not until he saw her with his own eyes, walking out with a suitcase. He couldn't wait another second. He couldn't bear to stay patient any longer. He brought her straight to his house. Is it you? The almost faded memories began to resurface, little by little. But the Jamie standing before me now, with his neat hair and tattooed arms, could never be the same boy from back then. Your tattoos, they're long gone. I didn't have money back then, so the scar stayed. Jamie rolled up his sleeve, showing me his arm. There were still a few clear scars visible. Setla, you still haven't answered me. Jamie's expression was deadly serious. Are you sure you're a good person now? What kind of good person acts like you? Jamie furrowed his brow slightly. Setla? He took a step forward and leaned down to kiss me. You're the best when you're quiet, like this. It was broad daylight and people were walking by. I tried to push him away, but he covered his head wound and groaned. Setla, my head hurts. I froze in place, too scared to move. Jamie kissed me for a long while, content before speaking again. Will you make me some soup tonight? You wish. Setla, why is your mind always in the gutter? I only asked you to make me soup. I didn't mean anything else. Jamie said it with such a straight face. I couldn't help but wonder if maybe I really was the one with the dirty mind. Are you serious? Jamie nodded seriously. I hesitantly got into his car. After drinking 2 large bowls of soup, he took advantage of his dizziness from the injury and tricked me into helping him upstairs. That helping him upstairs ended with him on the bed. When he pulled me into his lap, I stopped him. Jamie, you said you were going to announce some good news. What was it? There were some things I had to ask clearly. After all, even though I was beginning to have feelings for him, and we had history from childhood, I didn't want to be the other woman, hidden away in the shadows. If he was really going to marry someone else, it would be better to end things now before it hurt too much. Jamie looked at me from the bed and frowned. Setla, I'm like this. And you still have the energy to ask about that? I looked down and swallowed hard. But I had principles. Some questions had to be answered. Are you going to tell me or not? If not, I'm leaving right now. Jamie grabbed my waist and pushed me down on the bed. Who else would I marry? I'm 28. Of course I want to get married. Who would you marry? The woman who, after many years, was the first to tear my pants off. Jamie! I was so mad that I lunged at him to hit him, but Jamie just watched me and didn't move. He let me hit him a few times. Are you done? He slowly sat up and gave me a light slap on the backside. Now it's my turn. Jamie! I glared at him, furious, but Jamie lowered his head and kissed me gently. Setla, I've liked you for so many years.